he was very bad. Everything was down versus what they say he throws, and I just felt like that was just like a major letdown. Like that's got to weigh on you at some point. I mean, in this season, you know what I mean? Like that's huge. Like I'd be more confident if I was London, which I don't know if London lost players.
They lost some, but London brought back so many kids, and
but
they had guys that were just freshmen last year that were just huge contributors for them. So I mean, I think
go for it.
Okay, there we go. We kind of had some difficulties there. It still didn't update right, so I think because I opened in the wrong browser. So the title is kind of off, but guys, we're here finally, and I think it's the last time when was the last time we were here, Justin? At the end of the season?
No, we had a post your show, I believe.
It's the one we had with Matt, because that's what the title is on here is Our Friends Are Better Than Yours, and that was Matt. And our friends are still better than yours because we got two friends on today that we haven't had on in a while. It was a pretty wild day today in UIL and the Coastal Bend and the Rio Grande Valley, all across the state, actually, right? It was realignment day for you guys who have been under a rock the last couple days, right? So hang on. Here we go. Okay. I think we should be good. Eric Smith says we keep freezing. I think we're okay now. I think.
I do feel like we're a lot choppier.
I'm trying to close as much stuff as I can over here.
It does. It definitely feels a lot more choppy.
Yeah, hang on just a second.
Hey, we were having great baseball discussion, and then you just came in and walloped that.
Now Eric says we're working. Now Eric says we're working better, but everything's still kind of freezing up.
It's the cold weather, dude. Just blame it on
dude.
That.
It's got to be, dude. Everything's terrible down here. Internet works terrible. Our plants work terrible. I mean, it's everything's terrible.
Hey, question.
Anyways,
think it records.
It's been a long couple months since we've been on, but like we said, a lot of stuff has happened in the last day or so, and I guess we're here to talk about that today, right, guys? Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Okay. Realignment day, right? And a lot of things, a lot of changes that we saw happening. A couple that we didn't see happening. A lot of them are projected. We've got Kevin on here, and Kevin's got limited time down here. Kevin from Real Sports Live. So we'll go ahead and start with the Valley schools that are joining the Coastal Bend district. We'll start with 5A-D2. A lot of us saw this coming from up here because there really wasn't another direction for Flower Bluff and Gregory Portland to go to, right? If you looked at 5A-D2 up north in the San Antonio area, they've got some San Antonio schools going to Region 3. San Antonio Wagner is one that sticks out of the top of my head. So there was no room for our Coastal Bend guys to move forward. So the obvious choice was in the Valley, but it was what district they're going to land in, right? So now they're with Mercedes, Ed Calchelsa, a lot of previous playoff foes from back in the day. I feel like we're back in the 90s, right, Kevin?
Yeah, definitely. We knew down here too that there was going to be a mixture of Coastal Bend schools with a couple Valley schools, but you're absolutely right. It's just a matter of where and what district, who was going to get it right. So right off the bat, I circled 15-5-AG2, and that's Valley View, Mercedes, Gregory Portland, Ed Couch, Flower Bluff, and then Bronzo Porter. So that one really stood out to us down here, adding, Flower Bluff and Gregory Portland, and then Bronzo Porter, like we were talking off air, that for the first time in a long time, they're not together with their sister schools, Pace, Veterans, and Lopez. They're actually, Porter went down in numbers, so they went down to D2 rather than B and D1. But yeah, right off the bat, that was one thing that stood out in 15-5-AG2.
So Kevin, I mean, our folks up here know what to expect from Flower Bluff and Gregory Portland. Now Flower Bluff loses they lose Nash Villegas, who was their all-everything quarterback last year and put the team on their back towards the end of the season in the playoff run. What should we expect out of this Ed Couch team and the Mercedes team? Mercedes had a very good season last year, right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. And Cisneros was a senior. And the thing with Mercedes is that there's always going to be athletes and there's always going to be numbers. And they wound up tying for the district last year, and they got bounced in the first round. And a lot of people last year had Mercedes as the number one sub team. We knew Vela was number one in 6A, head and shoulders. And then when it came down to 5A and below, we knew that Mercedes was the top team in 5A, period. When it came to 5A, 4A, 3A, didn't matter. But they do lose him to graduation. But, just expect the same with Mercedes. They got a lot coming back offensively. At Cal Chelsea's kind of the wild card. 2 years ago, they made the playoffs they went to the slot T. And the interesting thing with Ed Couch was that they added Jaime Infante as their OC this past year. So Ed Couch is one of those rare teams that they're going to run the slot T, but they can also come out in the spread with what Coach Infante implements. And then Brownsville Porter is a team that's kind of been on the upswing these last couple of years with Coach Carlos Uresti. And it's going to be very different for them to not have to play 3 other Brownsville schools and have to play Palmview. And Coach Uresti today, he was very upbeat about his new district. And I was upset for him. I think I was more upset than he was. And he said, no, he's like, just look at it this way. He goes, now we're not going to be at Sam's every week, right? Playing Brownsville school. So he's like, we're going to kind of go out of our element. We're going to travel to Flower Bluff. We're going to travel to Gregory Portland, Valley View. They're no strangers to them. But with Porter, that's one team to keep an eye on, that this could be, this upcoming year, they could possibly make the playoffs. They lost Kevin Garcia the year before graduation. So this year they had to have life without their 3-year starter. But, Valley View, they need a new coach. Coach Esquivel resigned this past year during 2-a-days, and that was a very bizarre situation. And they have a little shakeup on their staff. But I do know that they have a lot of young guys in the pipeline. So they're probably a couple years away. But I mean, if you ask me now, you'd go Flower Bluff, Gregory Portland, Mercedes, and probably Ed Couch to make the playoffs right off the top of my head.
I don't think I can disagree with that. I mean, you can probably jumble the order up a little bit, and depending what happens, last year, you split that. I mean, GP and Flower Bluff split that, and Flower Bluff winning the one that really mattered, the one that advanced in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So Quentin, I mean, you're kind of digging into both those teams. I mean, what do you expect out of our Coastal Bend teams this year?
Just based on what Gregory Portland has coming back on both sides of the ball, I think GP, if you saw them make a leap in year 1 under Brent Davis, you could really see another step forward this year coming up. Obviously, that big win at Flower Bluff during the regular season was kind of maybe their statement game that really kind of showed people that they were going to be on that level and compete for a district title. And it was a back and forth game that could have gone either way at the Alamo Dome in the 3rd round of the playoffs when Flower Bluff got them. But Flower Bluff is established enough under Chris Steinbruck, that regardless of how many kids they graduate, they're going to be a stout team. They're going to be defensive minded. They're going to be tough. But they have some big shoes to fill, obviously, with what Nash Viegas has been able to give them the last 2 years.
Johnny Dickinson too.
And Johnny Dixon as well. Like, especially you see those guys expanding their role as the season went along. Johnny Dixon played both sides of the ball, and especially starting with that Veterans Memorial game, the first one they beat Veterans Memorial during the regular season. He was just a beast on the defensive line, and you hadn't really seen him used 2 ways like that before, and they continued to do that throughout the regular season and into the playoffs. But there are some big pieces that Flower Bluff has to fill, and considering that GP brings back a quarterback, brings back their starting running back that was 1,700 yards. They bring back a couple of their wide receivers. I think GP's, with a second year under Brent Davis, first glance, I would say, even though Flower Bluff was the defending regional champion in Class 5A Division 1, I would give GP the favorite nod in this one.
Coming into, before all this stuff shook out and kind of looking at this in the head, you kind of thought that you'd see the winners probably, speaking from a Coastal Band, we thought that GP and Flower Bluff would end up playing for the region. And yes, I am looking that far, and you can take receipts, do whatever. But now looking at the layout, Liberty Hill is in District 13, who's always a tough out, who just played for a state championship and hung in that game very well against that South Oak Cliff team. And then you look at District 14. This is kind of a head scratcher where you've got all SAISD schools and Alamo Heights. So that's kind of a game changer there. So this region has probably become a little bit harder than kind of what we thought it was going to be before you actually saw it on paper. And that's not taking a knock at District 16, Kevin, which is Mission Sharyland, Vets Memorial, PSGA Memorial, PSGA Southwest, Roma, and Pioneer. What should we expect out of District 16, Kevin?
Mission veterans, they got Abrigo. He's going to be the next best thing for them at quarterback. They're going to have Cody Von Wald back at linebacker. And, this defense for Mission veterans, traditionally, you don't really, when first thing you think about Mission veterans, you'll think quarterbacks, you'll think receivers. But their defense really stepped up and did a number this past year. Pioneer, good grief. They had literally 2 kids back from the previous year. So they were extremely, extremely young under Coach Eddie Galindo. PSJ Memorial, they're also a very young squad. Coach Will Littleton, he was in his first year. They're probably a couple years away, but they're a young rebuilding team. Sharyland, on paper right now, you'd have to go between Mission Veterans and Sharyland and Coach Corral. They found their mojo about second half of the season, and the Gonzalez brothers, the twins, actually, one plays receiver, one plays quarterback. Those 2 kids can go. And, it's really a very just a generic district, as far as with realignments and what got shaken up. And when I was talking with Coach Krell and Coach Gilpin today on our broadcast, it was just kind of the same. They're very familiar with each other. I don't mean to jump the gun here, but on the flip side of the 5A, the 16 5A D1 and the 15 5A D1, that's really where that's where really all the meat and potatoes were this afternoon. When we knew that Harlingen South was going to move down, we knew that PSJ North was going to move down. Some of those coaches were anticipating them being in the same district. Also, maybe even Vela being in the same district. But of the 2, 16 5A D1, you have the 3 Brownsvilles, Donna North, South, and Westlaco East. And, for me, I was like, Donna North needed to move down. But then a coach pointed out, they're like, well, Donna North, okay, they don't have to play Los Fresnos. They don't have to play Harlingen. They don't have to play San Benito. But now, they still have to play Harlingen South. They get BVM, and then they get Westlaco East. So it's like, the Chiefs just, can't catch a break. But, BVM, guys, what Coach Kelly did in his first year, it was really impressive. And with what he did with that triple option, and BVM really caught a lot of people by surprise. Their numbers are up. Kids really bought into his program really early on. You guys remember Richard Lefevre from Westlaco East 4 or 5 years ago?
I can't say that I do.
6'3", big dude. I called him the Pillsbury Throw Boy. No.
Hey, Lorenzen, rest in peace.
Well, he's got a younger brother. There's another Lefevre in the pipeline. He's coming back, and the dad, Lefevre, he's actually the OC there at Donna. So Mike Gonzalez, the head coach, they did some pretty good things this year in Donna. That's a team not really to sleep on. Coach Tarantola is taking over at Lopez. He's probably one of the more underrated offensive coordinators in the Valley, really, these last 5 years when he's with Coach Flores down at Rowe. So he's taking over that program. And, of course, Harlingen South moving down to 5A. And, for Harlingen South, these last couple of realignments, Harlingen South was actually the smallest 6A in 32 6A, right? And, for them to compete and for them to make the playoffs, not just in football, but, in softball, they're a power. Basketball, both boys and girls, are extremely good. Girls soccer, they were in the region final pre-COVID, so they were in the region final. So just across the board, a really good athletic program. And then Westlaco East, who are we kidding? They didn't make the playoffs last year. The universe felt out of tilt without Michael getting the playoffs. And I'm like, guys, do you really think he's going to allow his football team to miss the playoffs second straight year? I don't see that happening. Just above them, that was another interesting one where we're spoiled. We still get PSJ North Bella. We're going to get that district matchup coming up. And then you have the 3 McAllens. and then welcome back Rio Grande City, and then you have Palmview and Waterford.
You know, in
You're
talking to some of the coaches up here in Corpus Christi today, you know, that was the first thing that popped out. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that kind of breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief when you see Smithson Valley and Wagner in Region 3 and away from them. But, you know, with Vela coming down to 5A, with PSJA North, you know, those are teams that suddenly are right there in the mix with the Corpus Christi Veterans Memorial to try to win the region. And if anything, you know, you look on paper, you know, those guys might even be the favorites.
Yeah, you know, PSJ North, you know, last year, the 2020 year, they were half, you know, Ale Aparicio was a freshman, you know, the entire offensive line, underclassmen, just a bunch of young guys. They go to Sam's, they beat a veteran savvy Hannah team. They just come back in the second half, blow them away. They go into that week 2 game against Taft, and unfortunately they got bit by the COVID bug. And as cliche as it sounds, you know, they had unfinished business this past year in 2021. And, you know, Coach Kaufman, I mean, he's done a great job with that program and really just taking that next step. I mean, they had a guy in Jack Lugal who I called Super Jack, I mean, this kid, he just graduated, but I mean, they had a guy who could rush the passer, who can return punts, who was a receiver, who could line up at running back. He scored 7 touchdowns, 7 in the bi-district game against Harlingen South. I mean, the kid just went off. But the pieces they have back, they have Montes coming back at running back. They got Arredondo back at quarterback along with Alice. So they got plenty of weapons. And a lot of people are kind of saying what Pioneer did, where it was building up to Eddie Lee's senior year, that this will be the year where they can make a serious run. And a lot of people are kind of comparing that to PSJ North with what they're doing, what they did this year, and really what they can do the next 2 years. This team, their window, it's sky's the limit. And I'd be lying if they haven't looked past and said, hey, we can play for the region. And my good buddy, Brett Esparza, he's the DC there at PSJ North. And he told his kids, like, hey, we're lining up against Lake Travis today when they played him in the 3rd round. He goes, we're going to be moving down to 5A next year. We will never see a team like this ever again. This will be the best team you ever face in your life, Lake Travis. And the point being that they fully believe that they can get it done and they can go 3-4 deep and maybe play for the region. And, you know, like I said, they got the pieces to do it in that district. And I mean, Memorial, and here's a fun fact, that last year, the 3 teams that went 3 deep, Vela, McAllen Memorial, and PSJ North, now they're all in the same district.
Yeah.
You know, and Coach Patterson, with what he did, he had the most returning back starters last year. They went very quietly 3 deep. You know, I don't think myself, the Valley, gave McAllen Memorial enough credit. But they went 3 deep. North went 3 deep. Vela did their casual 3 deep. So, I mean, it's going to be a hell of a district. Hunter Curls coming back from Mac High. Coach Shelby got them back to the playoffs. So I mean, it's gonna be a really, really good district. 15,581.
You know, it's interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you know, a couple years ago when I guess we're probably at 6 years ago now, when Corpus dropped the 6A schools, when you had Ray, King, and Caroline still in 6A, and all of a sudden, you know, in the playoffs, instead of seeing Steele and Converse Judson and the big wigs from San Antonio, you're seeing teams that you think you can compete with. Well, I mean, I'm sure if you're in the Valley and you're 6A schools, and you don't have to see Westlake anymore, you don't have to see Lake Travis in the 3rd round. You know, you go see Corpus Christi Veterans Memorial, you see maybe Corpus Christi Miller. You know, that's you have to feel like, hey, I feel great about my matchup, because compared to what we used to play, you know, you saw the Corpus Christi schools get a boost when their playoff competition came back down to them, and I wouldn't be shocked to see the successful Valley schools do the same thing.
Yeah, and Coach Campbell today on our broadcast, he wasn't shy at all. He's like, exactly what you said, Q. He's like, we don't have to face Lake Travis. We don't have to play Cibolo still. We don't have to play Judson. So, you know, Vela, they just got a pipeline of athletes. And I actually was able to watch their 8th grade 8 team play, because they played against one of my family friends. And I was like, my goodness, like, those boys were big. They're 8th graders. So Vela is always going to have kids in the pipeline. But it's just going to be really exciting to see these next 2 years on what Vela and really PSA North can do. And, you know, it's all on the table for them. And I mean, you guys can agree or not agree with me, but I just felt that since Pioneer went on that run, I felt like this region has been wide open, especially for the Valley in particular. When you got teams like Pioneer and you have PSJ North, that these would be the years for a Valley team to go on a serious run. And when I mean serious, I mean not just 3 deep. I'm saying 4. Someone can win a 4th round game. I mean, it would take a lot, but who knows?
You know, and it goes the same for it's been the same the last couple of years. Region 4 in Big 5A, we hadn't had a small 5A school in the last couple of years. You know, and that's not taking anything away from these programs. It's just they're not as strong as your Region 2, your Region 3s, your Region 1s, and your Region 2s. You know, it's a different athlete down here than you have up there. The talent pool isn't as big. You don't have school built on top of school out there. We're kind of a little more spread out, so it's kind of hard. And in an area like what we've got here, you know, we've got so many schools that aren't really jam packed, with the exception of one that we have in this area here. I mean, you guys in the Valley, you guys are losing enrollment right and left, which you see these drop downs to go into these idea schools. Right. Yeah. So this is why you're seeing these McAllens, these former 6A programs drop down to 5A. So you're losing that talent pool. So it becomes harder to compete when you go up north. But 5A, both 5As, region 1 or Division 1 and Division 2, the regions are wide. Region 4 is wide open.
Yeah. I know the enrollment. So I'm at a playoff basketball game. It's halftime right now. I'm actually at an idea school, but yeah, with so many ideas opening up, you know, we're seeing schools losing enrollment, and you know, COVID too. COVID has something to do with it, particularly Rio Hondo. Rio Hondo went down to 3A, and you know, their numbers, they're struggling with numbers, and it had a little bit more to do with COVID. And you know, but before I go, guys, I'm gonna have to skip here in a bit. My last thought is going to be, I'm going to jump down to 4A real quick. I'm sorry. 16 4A G1. I was just like, wow. La Feria, Zapata, Kingsville King, Hidalgo, Peloso, Midway, Calallen, and Alice. La Feria, that team stands out to me the most because they got a young group of guys coming up in this program, and Coach Oscar Salinas back in spring ball this year said, Kevin, if you're going to get us, this year is the year that you need to get us, because we have so much coming back. They have a promising quarterback coming up in the pipeline who they think could surpass Dorian Hernandez, Brandon Leca, the Dario Sanchez's of the world. So La Feria's got a really, really bright future. But I swear, when I saw Calallen, I said, well, Merry Christmas, La Feria. You guys get Calallen in your district. Like, you know, it's going to be extremely tough. But I mean, Alice was a very young team last year that I saw against Harlingen South. I was really impressed with what Alice did. TM's always going to have athletes. Hidalgo is another team that they kind of took a step back last year. They you know, losing Zachary Carillon, the Valley's. He led the Valley in rushing 2 years ago under Stump's slot T offense. They took a step back, so Hidalgo's a little bit of a question mark for me. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what La Feria can do, because I can see them beating Zapata, beating King, beating Hidalgo. And then it's a toss-up between Calallen and Alice. I think those are going to be some really interesting games. And if Calallen can come down to the Valley, that's going to be a big deal for everyone down here. Because I remember in 2018, San Benito hosted Judson in the third round of the playoffs, and that was a big deal for everyone in the Valley. So the Valley knows Calallen well. Calallen knows the Valley well. Vice versa. There's a lot of history there with those two programs. But guys, I gotta go. I gotta shoot some pictures. We have MMA and Idea Westlaco. They're in a region semifinals. It's they're not UIL and they're not TAPS. They're in some kind of unique playoff game. So I'm gonna go shoot some pictures, and we're actually on live right now. But appreciate the time, guys. Jake, thanks for inviting me. Spud, good talking to you. Q. I'll be making my trip up to the Coastal Bend. I'm gonna be catching some Calallen, some SGA, and Bishop softball. Man, I'm fired up.
Gonna be good. Another good year. Good to see you, Kevin.
All right, man.
Yeah,
we'll see you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for taking the time.
You know, he brought up that 16 4A district right now.
Let's just pick up from there.
Sure. You know, it's interesting. La Feria, if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to double check this, but I think they had 2 losses last year, and they were both to Beeville. So, I know that there's an excitement level, but I'd be interested. If they're young, like Kevin was saying, next year might be a little bit of an eye-opening experience, and you might need to look at year 2, because sometimes when you have these massive kind of changes and you're all of a sudden thrust into competition that maybe you weren't in before, it's a little bit of an eye-opening experience that first year of your 2-year realignment. Maybe in that second year, they'd be in a better position to try to challenge a Calallen or challenge an Alice. But, if you're Calallen, for 40 years, they've taken on all comers for the most part. So, I don't think they're going to bat an eyelash. And if you're a program like Calallen, you see this district, and outside of playing Alice, you kind of maybe would want more competition. The district that they were in the last couple of years, where they had to play Miller, they had to play Port Lavaca, Calhoun, Alice, Beeville, Souza, veteran coach, good enough to be able to make you work. All of a sudden you're thrust in this district, and now in Steve Campbell's first year taking over for Phil Danaher, the legend, you're probably gonna want to try to challenge yourself, but at the same time, Cal, same story as ever. Teams don't want to play Calallen. People, especially now that they're Class 4A, it was tough when they were Class 5A to try to get people to come play Calallen. Now that they're Class 4A, especially, that's why you end up seeing them play teams like San Antonio, Cornerstone, things like that, because it's just a tough sell to say, hey, come play Calallen. Not only are we gonna beat you, but we're so physical that you might feel it a week or two later, and that's kind of the story of Calallen.
Yeah, a lot of folks from the area weren't really happy with this draw for Calallen, and it was a lot of mixed reviews on it. That just, if you saw the comments on social media, a lot of folks weren't happy with it. So that's going to be an interesting district. District 15 is kind of took us by surprise. We definitely thought that Rockport and Calhoun were going to be in our Coastal Bend district again, and no, you see them moving north. Which looks to shape up to be a pretty difficult district as well. Pleasanton went on a very good run last year. They lost their senior quarterback in the playoffs, and they had a freshman come in who hadn't taken a snap all year and played lights out. So you've got that to worry about. Beeville, they're always good, right? A Chris Souza coach team is always a very good team, and they were up and down last year, but they won some ball games. Lavernia, always tough. Floresville's a drop down as well. So that's going to be an interesting, see how they make out in that district.
We talk about, Alice, and we think of obviously the success that they've had, the playoff runs they've had. Remember, it was Beeville that got into the playoffs out of that district last year. It wasn't Alice. Alice did not make the playoffs for the young talent that they did have, the quarterback and others positions. Solis was maybe one of the top 5 or 10 players in the entire Coastal Bend. Obviously, he's going to be gone, but they did have talent, and they couldn't navigate their way through that. Beeville beat Alice during the regular season to get into the playoffs. But at the same time, Alice could have had Miller, very easily could have had Miller during the regular season, didn't get them. So, it's interesting to see. I know I spoke to Justin Evans earlier today. He thinks that obviously if they can stay healthy, numbers are sometimes an issue with Miller, but they're on pretty even ground, because in a lot of the other schools in CCISD, the numbers are kind of down as well. So if they can stay healthy, he thinks that they're going to be able to compete. And I know not to discount the growth of a King, a Ray, and Carroll under a new head coach moving forward into the new campus. It's hard to see, at least right now, anybody but Miller Vets, East and West, right now, at least being penciled in as those probable 4 playoff spots.
No, I agree 100%. And just like you said, it is kind of hard to gauge it. And it's going to be interesting to see how, the big talk is New Carroll going to be open enrollment? Is New Carroll going to be open enrollment? That's the big question right now. And I guess until that's answered, we're not really going to be able to see what kind of numbers Carroll's going to put in, if they're going to see a mass exodus of athletes from other districts going to this one, like we saw Vets when they opened up. It's the shiny new toy, and everybody wants to be a part of it, right? So let's see how that one shakes out.
I think they've worked so hard to try to get everybody at the same level and get everybody down into 5A, and not have Vets enrollment so high compared to everybody else, that I don't think they're going to tinker with things too much. I think slowly you're going to see Carroll's numbers bounce up a little bit just because of what they've redistricted in the last couple of years. But and I think looking at it on paper and the growth that we see in the cutoff line across the state, I mean, there's a possibility that we don't have to worry about this D1, D2 thing in 2 years. Vets might naturally be below that cutoff line to where they're in Division II, and then they don't have to worry about opting up any schools, and then we get GP and Flower Bluff back into the district, just because they're already doing things. And if you look the numbers of Veterans Memorial, at the ninth grade level, you're starting to see it come down from where it was a couple years ago when they just opened. So as those classes trickle up and the big classes graduate, Veterans Memorial's number is going to come down, and naturally the line for the 5A Division I, Division II line is probably going to grow. So we might, all this talk about split divisions and who's going to opt up and who's not, that might be completely out the window in 2 years. As we kind of see everything trickle down a little bit, and we see Carroll start to boost up their enrollment a little bit.
I think that's where the disappointment comes from the mixed review people, especially with the Calallen district and GP and Bluff fans. They're not as vocal out there on social media, but I mean, it's definitely, I've watched football here my whole entire life, and it's the first time I've really ever seen us tangle up with an actual, I mean, we're a Valley district. I mean, essentially we're an extension of the Valley right now. Like, that's what we were in, And normally it's, you get the Valley first round or second round, depending on how it goes in playoffs. And now we're that team. So I think that's where people probably see some disappointment. And that's not discrediting the Valley, but I mean, let's be honest here. Like you said earlier, Lafayette is supposed to be on the up and up, and they took some L's to Beeville, and Beeville's not been the strongest they've ever been. And personally that I've seen. So, I do think that kind of takes away a little bit from I guess the shiny on the districts, and that's why I ended up liking Rockport's district a lot more than anyone else's. It just seems right. Port Lavaca, Rockport, Pleasanton, Floresville, Lavernia, Beeville, that feels right to me, just looking at it from the outside in. And like you said, Vets comes down, and now you got the Corpus schools, GP and Bluff. That feels right to me versus us being in the district with Mercedes and Valley View and stuff like that. So not hating on it. I think it'll be a nice change, but I think that's probably where some of the mixed reviews came from today, from people that who don't follow it maybe as close as we do, sitting there thinking, how are we in the Valley now? And they're not really realizing the numbers and just the split ups make that, and
it's something that we talked about with Kevin just a few minutes ago, just the fact that you see less and less 6As. They keep trickling down and dropping. And now all of a sudden, there's two 5A Division I and Division II districts in the Valley, if you consider the Bluff GP district a Valley district. So, when you look at 15 and 16 in both 5A Division I and Division II are encapsulated by Valley schools, because the 6As are dwindling in the Valley, and they're coming down, and it's kind of changing things, the dynamic. I mean, look at it, District 14 5A this time around, which means, in by district, instead of getting a Valley team, Corpus Christi is going to be playing Laredo schools, San Antonio Southside, the new San Antonio Southwest, Southwest Legacy. The schools that you've seen 2 rounds into the playoffs or 3 rounds in the playoffs are now going to be the bi-district foes for the next couple of years. But I think the thing that I've seen the most over the afternoon is people start to, you're not in the same district anymore, but how come you're not scheduling? I tweeted about it earlier, but it's a shame that Flower Bluff and Veterans Memorial couldn't find a way to play, because that has been just a monster of a game. There have been just some crazy zany things that have happened since those two started battling, when Vets open, and the fact that that's not going to happen. And if they stay in different divisions, it may never happen again. And to think about that, that's a sad state of things. I'm happy to have Calallen and Flower Bluff back, because it's a really good game between two well-respected programs, but Vets and Bluff should play. That's just my opinion. I
tell you what, Quentin, you're talking about the scheduling and the lack of these games, but if you've looked at some of these schedules that we retweeted today and put out, a lot of these pre-district schedules are looking very tough. Like Joe Trevino just commented here, and I was trying to chase this schedule down because I had heard there was a nice little matchup there. Cueros pre-district, El Campo, Navarro, Yoakum, Calallen, and Beeville.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's a pretty solid little lineup there, and that Calallen Cuero game should be pretty nice. Where it's going to be at, I'm not sure. But then some of the other schedules that you saw,
I think going off pedigree, yes, that sounds good, but of course, I haven't really sat down and looked exactly at Cuero, and I haven't really, looked super hard at Cal. I know they bring back Epi, and they're traditionally always good, but until you see, Cuero lost two studs, both their star receiver.
yeah,
There's
they did.
college ball, and we watched them live. I watched them live back to back weeks, and it wasn't like I saw anyone like a third receiver making those plays. I don't know if they bring back their running back. They had a really solid, actually two solid running backs, but it's just gonna be interesting to see, once you kind of like take a step back and like see like, okay, like these two are matching up, who are they bringing back? Like, and and this is uncharted territory for Calallen. This is what, first year in 30 plus years of not being led by the man.
Yeah. AP right after Phil.
The proteges, it's the protege's turn, right?
Yeah.
It's the junior's turn, whatever they call them over there. So,
well, I think one of the things
would be nice.
When I first got here, the very first game I ever covered for the Caller Times was Calallen versus Medina Valley. And I think Sosa was still in Medina Valley in the first or second round of the playoffs. But, and I could see right away, the teams that have great staffs, in terms of the adjustments that they make at halftime, that really set them apart, even when they're not playing to their full capability, what they can do in the third and fourth quarter, just off the charts with Calallen. That's always the case, and always the talk about how whatever they look like in week 1 versus what they look like in week 13 is just a completely different team.
Completely different.
But Calallen forever has 2, 3, 4 guys that could be a head coach somewhere else, but are still on the staff, veteran guys. So, I mean, I understand, Phil Danaher leaving, the best legacy, the most wins, everything that he accomplished there. But people might be underselling Steve Campbell and what he's able to do. And as strong as they've been defensively, with him putting even more of a stamp on that team, who knows, how they improve possibly even more and what they can accomplish as well. But he's basically been head coach, 1A for Calallen for quite a while. They've been right there, and he's been a huge contribution to what Callan's been able to do the last 3+ decades.
I think there's a lot of people inside that community that think that he can take them to another level they ain't seen before.
There's already been rumors that they're going to open up the playbook. That's some of the rumors that's already been talking. A lot of the wing tee and then a little of it's something else. But those are just rumors, of course. But that's some of the talk that's going on right now. Going back to schedules, Rockport Fulton put their schedule out.
That is an impressive schedule.
And
considering that they have some good games in district as well, the non-district portion of what Rockport's able to do and where they're going to challenge themselves. Credit Jay Seibert. They obviously have going to be a third-year starting quarterback in Ace Seibert. They threw the ball a little bit more. They were so explosive at times last year. John Chupi, obviously, he's going to graduate, but credit to Coach Seibert for really putting a challenging schedule out there that's going to really test them and get them ready for what they hope is a deep playoff run.
If you go back and look 4 or 5 years ago now, I believe
he's always scheduled tough.
He's always scheduled really tough pre-district. And honestly, I think that helped them the year that they should have beat Wimberley when they were in that deep playoff run. They had I want to say they played El Campo that year early on. They came off 2 back-to-back years of having to face Waco La Vega in the playoffs when La Vega won state, I believe. And then he incorporated some tougher games in non-district. And I think last year was the first year I thought to myself, well, that's not the normal strength schedule you see him do non-district. And their district was tougher in certain games. But when we saw that schedule today, I thought to myself, yeah, that's more like how he normally schedules. And honestly, that's an exciting schedule. There's good local matchups on that schedule. They kept Sinton in there. That's turned out to be a pretty good little rivalry.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's gonna shape up nice.
Speaking of Sinton, we put this out late. This was probably about 6:00 when I saw it. Coach Troutman tweeted out their schedule. Don't know which games where yet, but they've got Beeville, Rockport, Calhoun, Edna, and Lavernia. as their pre-district slate. So again, a pretty solid schedule. Orange Groves look pretty solid as well. I think we're going to be in for some pretty good games, before we get into these tough districts that we've got down here. Going in, talking about sitting, right, that's going to be a 5-team district this year in small 4A. And, you've got a couple contenders in there that aren't usually in the playoff hunt that could potentially be in the playoff hunt this year. Gearing for that fourth spot. So that should be pretty interesting there.
And Orange Grove, Cutter Stewart's 4th year as a starting quarterback. I know when you come off of a major knee injury like he did, it takes a little bit of time to come back. And, I know maybe his stats weren't what they had been, but he was replacing an entire wide receiver core, new running back and stuff like that. You get some more time with them, and now he's going to be a 4th-year starter. I could see, just looking at the way that district sets up, they may be the team to challenge Sinton, or, the team that could possibly, give them a run. And just a couple years ago, I think when Cutter was a sophomore, they beat Sinton in that first game of the season, kind of threw us all for a surprise.
Yeah. That was their coming out party.
Yeah.
To me, that's the exciting thing. You do this long enough, you watch high school kids and their development, and to see where Andrew Body was when he was a freshman starting to where he got to be, one of the best quarterbacks I've ever covered in my, in 25 years of doing high school football, to see those type of guys, to see a Michael Everett, develop at Odom, to see those guys, Brad Breck from where he was as a sophomore to a senior. And now it's crazy to think this, Jaden Brown's going to be a junior next year, and you see the progression that Body made at Miller, and Cutter Stewart's going to be a senior, and these guys, they get their 2nd and 3rd years, that's when you can get a good high school quarterback and sometimes turn him into a great high school quarterback. And you have a year like an Eddie Lee Marburger, you see what Mission Vets quarterbacks can do, what Landry Gilpin did, those type of things, that's when you can take a good quarterback and make him special.
And we're talking about Cutter Stewart, and we didn't mention this with Cyber, but both these guys taking invites to the regional Elite 11. So that's saying that they're finally getting eyes on our quarterbacks down here. Just to get an invitation to that thing, even though it's just a regional, you got to get to the regional to start moving up. But the fact that we got 2 local kids down there that are going to be competing there, that says a whole lot about those two.
They both notably made good camps last year. Cutter and Ace both were at the A&M camp where they were competing. And that's not just some walk up and pay and you're there. I mean, you got actual coaches and scouts, and you have good talent looking at you. So Cutter and him have made some good camps, and I think you're right. Yeah, they are finally getting, I think, some attention that they deserve. And I think, obviously we're overlooked down here big time. But it is nice to see guys like that get an Elite 11 invite. It's not very every day down here.
And I think this is Cutter's 2nd year. He got the invite last year, and this is Ace's 1st. So congratulations, guys, if you guys are watching, or you guys that are supporting them in the programs. They wouldn't get there without you two as well. So good job, guys. Now looking at, I guess, the next district. Everything else kind of south of here really didn't change a whole lot. Your 3As kind of stayed the same. You got London, who's making the move up, and they're actually
into a tough 3A district.
Tough 3A district, with Edna, Industrial, Mathis. Who else is in that district off the top of my head? Goliad. And let me pull it up here.
It's Arandis Pass, London, Edna, Goliad, Mathis, and Palacios.
Yeah, that's right. So that was a very tough district last year. Edna took that one. Edna was a strong team in that district last year, and they're expected to be just as good. Old Sitten coach leading that team, and Jimmy Mitchell, who's the Edna head coach right now. So that's going to be an interesting matchup when Sitten. We don't know where it's going to be, if it's going to be in Edna or it's going to be in Sitten, but that's going to be a pretty good game and a pre-district game as well. Mathis again, Mathis always has some pretty good athletes. They just can't get over that hump yet to get that push. I think this is the year that Trey Stevens and company may finally get in.
And then looking over at District 16, 3A, the one that's across from it, San Diego coming off of the year that they had. I know they lost that heartbreaker to London at the last game of the regular season. Yes, both teams were undefeated, trying to cap off the undefeated regular season, and London got them in overtime. But, they're coming off that year. and they have a district, I know Lyford's been kind of challenging in that district for the last couple of years, but it's a district that other than that, San Diego has a good opportunity to try to piece together a couple of consecutive successful seasons and maybe try to do something in the playoffs, if that's possible for them. So, I think the one other thing we missed, when you look at Class 4A, Bishop makes the move up to Class 4A.
That's right.
And they get into a district where there's only 4 schools.
Print the shirts. Print the shirts now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. 2-time by-district qualifiers, already. So that works out well for them and Louis Rodriguez. So that might be a good opportunity for them. I'm impressed. I was talking with Ray Castillo, our reporter here with the Caller Times, and the fact that Bishop found 7 non-district games is like, I don't know how you even do that. That's just, you have teams trying to find 4 non-district games, and Bishop found 7.
There was talk there a little bit about doing a round robin, but I guess that kind of got hashed out to the side. That would have been pretty interesting. I saw that a 4-team district out in West Texas is going to be doing a round robin. Like Tornillo was one of the teams that was on, and I can't tell you who the other 3 teams are. And each one's going to count. It's a double district game. You essentially have an 8-team district that way. So it kind of helps out with travel, especially way out there, right? I mean, having to schedule 5 non-district games, 6 non-district games being out that far.
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm from El Paso. We make the trip from Corpus Christi to El Paso twice, if not 3 times a year, on the road, a long, long road on I-10 after we get to San Antonio. And Ozona, which is basically the halfway point, about 350 miles from Corpus Christi. Ozona is in the same district as Anthony, Texas, which is on the Texas-New Mexico border, north of El Paso. So that's 6.5 hours, basically, by bus for 2 district games, for 2 district teams. So that's just people talk about the travel that Corpus Christi schools are going to have to go to the Valley, and I'm like, well, yeah, be on a bus for 6.5 hours and then play a football game.
Yeah, try that. Yeah, that's not fun. We just made that drive this weekend. We lived in San Angelo for a couple of years, and we made that drive. I mean, that's not nearly that far. It's a 5-hour drive from there to the Coastal Bend, but went out to Marfa this weekend, and man, that was a hike. Man. And then you jump into small 3A, no big change there. The biggest thing that we saw in 16 3A is Skidmore Tynan moving down and George West sliding down from the north to fill that spot there. So there's the biggest change there is George West. George West with a new head coach this year. So that's going to be interesting to see how
second
that works
straight
out.
year second straight year they've had a coaching change.
It seems like a coming bang now, huh? New coach each year.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
But I know under Coach Cornegie, George West had an awesome run at the varsity level, but they went 2 or 3 years in a row, I think, without losing games at the ninth grade, the JV level. So they had a lot of success going up. Last year was a little bit. I know it's a new coach, you changed some things, but they got a lot of kids that are accustomed to winning in George West. So you put them in this district, and I'm sure they're going to be pretty competitive, with the Odoms and the Hebronvilles of the world.
Yeah, and they come back. They were in this district before this last realignment, so I mean, it's kind of like putting on an old pair of shoes or riding a bike again. You don't forget how to do it. I guess the biggest change now is 2AD1, right? And we nailed this one, right, Spud? We called this one from the get-go. I think we missed Bloomington on that one. We thought Bloomington was going to go north, but you've got Shiner and Refugio in the same district, and they've been in a district together before. What, 4 years ago, Justin? 4, maybe 2 realignments ago.
About 4 years ago.
Yeah,
probably 2 realignments ago.
So nothing new. Nothing new. They're familiar, obviously, right? The last couple of years has been the region final matchup, which has always been very entertaining. I think
it still could be that way.
It can, right? I mean, they can play each other twice. You're going to have one for the district championship and maybe one potentially for the region championship.
They actually did. The last time they were matched up, they both split one. And me and Mark were talking about that today when we were leaving work, and we both. I didn't look it up on that time. I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but we couldn't remember. We think that it was Shiner beat him in the regular season and Refugio knocked him off in the playoffs one year, and for one reason, I think Refugio got him twice. I think the first year or the second year they got him 2 times in a row. And the first year there was a split, and I can't remember exactly how it went. But I think they split a year, and then Refugio got 2 of them on them. I'm gonna have to fact check that later, but yeah, I mean that's potentially your biggest matchup right there in that region. I really look at it from a whole.
Well, you look at that district, and then this is very reminiscent to me of 2 years ago. Tolosa Midway finally get to go down to Class 4A, but Calallen falls to Class 4A also. Miller, Alice, they're in the district with Port Lavaca, Calhoun, and so for once, Tolosa Midway thinks, hey, we're going to be on even keel, and they get thrown into a district with 4 of the best teams in the entire region, all in the same district. And now you're Skidmore Tynan. They haven't been bad. They've been winning 4, 5, 6 games the last couple of years. They've gotten into the playoffs, I believe, and they go down to 2A. Have some comparable teams, and they're in a district with Refugio and Shiner. Three Rivers isn't bad. Has some good young talent, and they're in a district with Refugio and Shiner. So
I tell you what, that Bobcat faithful from Skidmore Tynan, they don't forget that 2008 team. They don't forget that team at all, right? That was the last time they beat Refugio. So they've got that going for them, right? That's the last time they were in a district. Well, it wasn't the last time they were in a district together.
Yeah, write that down. 2008.
2008. Yeah, is that right, Ryan? I know you're watching. Was that the year? Waiting for his answer. Maybe he's kind of licking his wounds there for a little bit. Ryan Linney. He's a Bobcat super fan. He's the head of one of them. Him and Billy. They head up the Bobcat Sports Network. They do a pretty good job there.
That 08 team from Refugio, they were rather loaded up too. I believe
they were very loaded up.
They had Swain. They had Whitmire. My old neighbor Ryan. Ryan was on that team, I believe.
Oh, was he?
I think so.
Yeah. That they had a very loaded team. And
my buddy Ryan. That's a crappy way to put it. My old neighbor. My buddy Ryan.
So that, I mean, and then you got Ganado, who joins that district as well, who's pretty tough. They went 4 rounds deep in 3A a couple years ago, and they've made the playoffs every year, but running into that buzzsaw of Refugio.
There's a lot of familiarity with these teams, though. I mean, they've seen each other a lot over the years. Ganado and Refugio have knocked it around a little bit, and Skidmore, obviously.
Even when you get changes, so many of these schools, like you said, have that previous familiarity. It isn't like the 15-5A district where GP and Flower Bluff are going to be playing these schools that they haven't played, and they are very different and completely new to scheme against. So, even though there's some changes, like you said, it's putting on an old shoe.
I like this district because it's bringing. I really don't like seeing Refugio kind of go the southways. I like them kind of staying where they're at right there. It just fits a little better for me.
Okay, Ryan, correct me. It wasn't 08. It was 06, 2006, and it was. That's correct. It was a pre-Herring era. It was before he got there, and I think that's what got their old coach run out of town. I think, right? Isn't
that guy was a Sinton guy, Coach Post or Chris Jones. Chris Jones was his name, was, I think, right?
I'm not sure. Ryan will chime in here in a little bit.
He was with, I think, Davis during the Sinton era. Mark was reminiscent about it today. I think he was with Coach Davis when they went on the state run in Sinton. He ran he went north somewhere, came down to Refugio, then he went to Lamarck and got ran out of Lamarck, and I have no idea where he's at now.
Yeah, he thinks it was Jones, and Ryan's a walking encyclopedia of Refugio football over there, so I'm pretty sure he's correct there. But yeah, so that's been the day, right? It's been kind of eventful, kind of non-eventful.
I want to hear Hugh. You were there, right, when the coaches busted open the box and start flying. So it's no secret, right? If you're on Twitter, he said, she said, coaches prodding at each other, people agreeing to stuff, then backing out. No one wants, people scared of each other. What is that like in that? What is it? Hey, I'm bringing it there, dude. What is it like in that war room when people get scared, dude? What's it like in that war room when people get scared? And here's my take on this. I just don't understand the ploy to run away from competition, right? Why are we gonna back out of competition?
Well, I think if you talk to any coach pretty much on realignment, I think pretty much everybody goes into realignment week thinking, okay, if I'm on a 5-teamer, these are my 6 teams. If I'm in a 6-teamer, these are my 5 teams. They think that at least they have handshake agreements. They said, yeah, if we're in the 6 team, we'll play you. And they always think they have it situated until they get handed the district and, oh, I'm in a tough district. I'm going to need to win some non-district games to win 7. So I need to drop, I can't play X. I can't play Y. That's a perennial playoff team. So all of a sudden there's a phone call. Yeah, we can't play you guys anymore or whatever. And all of a sudden, every coach that thinks they had their whole schedule lined up is on the phone at the Region 2 center. I mean, that's just the way it is. Everybody's on the phone. Everybody had somebody drop out. Everybody dropped somebody, and everybody's just going crazy, burning up the lines. Walking over to Coach A, Coach B. Hey, have you heard anything about week 3? They're putting it up on the grease board. Hey, La Feria needs a week 4 or whatever. Whoever it may be. Up on the grease board, there's 5 different schools trying to figure it out, and you get frustrated coaches, saying like, oh, I can't believe XYZ wouldn't play me, or and they're sitting there, they're talking, knowing that there's media in the room, and they're saying, I don't understand why this team doesn't want to play, or we tried forever to try to get this team to play, and nobody wants to come to the table. So
no one wants to smoke. That's the term. No one wants to smoke.
No one wants to smoke. Yes. So it's just it's tough because you have so many different coaches telling you different things, and I feel like I have good relationship with so many coaches here in the Coastal Bend, after having been here for 7 football seasons now, 6.5 years. But you have other coaches telling you one thing, another coach tells you this thing, and and then coaches posting certain things on social media or other people, and it goes back and forth, and then you get the fans involved, and it's just, for me as a sports reporter, people assume that like, oh, you guys want so-and-so to win, or you guys are rooting for whoever.
You hate my team.
I'm rooting for a good story. I'm rooting for a great game, so I want to see the best teams play the best teams, because I'm going to be out there on Friday night. So, whatever the reason is that Team A and Team B aren't going, whatever the reason is, I want to go cover Flower Bluff Veterans Memorial. I want to go cover Flower Bluff versus Calallen. I want to see Miller take on good teams, and it gets me excited when they play Sinton, or they play a Rockport Fulton, or another good team in the area, as opposed to, a team where they're going to drop 60 points in the first half and then just move on. I want to see good games. So if it was up to me, I'd love to see, the top teams all play each other and not drive hours out of town to go play other teams. But there's a lot of factors that go into it, and there's a lot of coaches that are coaching somewhere else that used to be on a staff here or staff there, and they have agreements to play these teams also. So there's so many things that go into it, but it quickly swirls out of hand. Once you get into the first time one coach drops this team and that team, and all of a sudden it's like the stock market. People are just going nuts, and it's buzzing for like 25-30 minutes.
There's a couple things to that I'd like to add. Like, I think, we do need to force these teams to play each other. I want Flower Bluff and Vets to happen again. I think like everyone else. But seriousness though, I do agree. It is way nicer when we get those matchups locally. But I will say this, it is also nice and refreshing to see some of our teams from this area go out and challenge themselves. Miller going and scheduling El Campo, that's a good challenge. You're bringing the unicorn down, the number 1 running back in the nation. I think everyone who's free and doesn't have a game to go to should check that out at Buck this year. And then turn around week 3 and Vets goes and schedules El Campo, and if you know anything about El Campo and their history, they're always a solid team, but you're talking about a generational talent coming through that school right now. And Ruben Owens in his 4th year. And you're talking about a guy that you have a good chance of seeing on ESPN the following year, every week at a perennial power in college. So I do enjoy that aspect of our guys when they can't get games down here, of challenging themselves to a tougher matchup up north. And I think that's something we kind of talked about after the season. It's been a big discussion, on how teams down here get to where you can compete round 4 and 5 with teams from Region 3. And I think it does start with seeing better competition versus scheduling down. And of course, I know stuff happens, right, where you have to, you sometimes you can't make a game happen and you're taking who you can get to fill you out. But, if you looked around the state today, there's been some we talked about Rockport scheduling hard. There's been some teams that scheduled like that up north as well, and we're talking about some powerhouse teams that
Yeah.
just came
Did
off
you
the
see? Did you see
championship.
South Oak Cliff's schedule?
Yes,
They're playing
Fifth
Duncanville.
schedule.
They're playing
DeSoto,
DeSoto.
uh,
They're playing a private school, and God, I can't think of who the second week was. I'm trying to find it.
China Spring hammered out a big one. They have a pretty. I want to say they had a pretty. There's a couple of them I retweeted them today on my Twitter that if you look at the districts, I mean, they're going out and challenging themselves. I think El Campo got put La Vega maybe on their schedule, so El Campo went and grabbed La Vega. I think, if I'm correct.
I think
Brock,
El Campo Cuero is the first game of the season. Then they
yes.
also have Miller, and they also have Veterans Memorial. So
And then they turn around and get La Vega somewhere in there.
So I mean, El Campo's going for it, but I mean, if you have the best running back in the country, well, why aren't you going to go for it? Go for it.
For
you know?
sure.
You know
Hey, Brock, it's Brock. Brock scheduled ultra hard this year. If you look at their non-district, Brock put some hitters on that team.
You know, in some of those situations, it's kind of like what you saw with Refugio and Mart a couple years ago. I mean, that's a long way to go for a non-district game. But when you get to that level and you are competing for state and you're so much better than every other school at your classification, you know, you have a hard time finding teams that want to play you. Because even if you're a 3A or 4A, you know, what do you get from playing Refugio? You know, possibly a loss. And then why did you lose to a Class 2A team? So
For
it's
sure.
tough to schedule those teams, and it's why you see a Calallen have a difficult time sometimes scheduling teams, because you get to a certain level and it's like, what am I going to get out of playing you? You know, you're probably going to beat me convincingly, you know, unless I'm an up and coming team and I want to test myself, you know, it's kind of a challenge. You know, you don't always get Miller, you know, deciding, you know what, let's go for it. Let's play Waco La Vega. You know, Calallen did it 2 years ago. They played Waco La Vega. They went on the road to play Waco La Vega. So, you know, but, you know, when you get to that level, when you get to the stature of a Brock, a Mart, you know, teams your classification and nearby you aren't going to play you. So some of those world beater schedules come out of necessity as much as, hey, I'm going to show that I'm the best.
Yeah. And you need to challenge yourself too. I mean, to figure yourself out, or else you're going to turn out to be like Coach Aaron, the most hated man in the world. I mean, when he was having a hard time scheduling games, he was leaving starters in to get conditioning in. And I mean, he got death threats because he was beating teams 70, 80 points, you know, and I don't know how I don't know how you attack that. Like, people are going to say, well, it's their job to stop you. Everyone will say it's a high school sports game. You can kind of let off a little bit, but he had a valid point. His team was getting tired round 3 and 4 when they were coming up against good squads. And the whole year, you know, you get used to playing half a game and you breeze through it. I mean, what else can you do?
You know, I heard a story a couple years back. Man, I can't even remember the name of the school. It was a 6-man school. Quentin, you may remember. You may have been in that area at the time. Chad Ritchie, I think was the coach's name. Oh, I can't think of the team. You know, they kind of had the same problem, you know, where they were running the score up, and he ended up having his kids run gassers after the game, you know, and his thing was, you know, I'm going to make a decision, and I'm either going to get fired for this or it's going to win over. And sure enough, you know, these kids are running gassers after the game, and people are, hey, what are y'all doing? It's like, well, my kids didn't get enough work. We're getting work in. And they ended up turning into a whole thing. You know, you had the JV kids out there running with the kids after the game. You had the youth football players out there running with them after the game. It became like almost a ritual after that. And I thought that was pretty neat, right? I mean, it's another way to get work in. Whether that's the best way to do it, I don't know. But
well, I think that's interesting is, like, you get into the second or third round of the playoffs, or even the first round of the playoffs in 6-man, because only 2 teams go out of each district at the 6-man level. But, you know, if you're really good, you 45 8 of your 10 opponents anyway. So you have 2 good teams, and they're on the same level because that team only played half a game for 7 of their 10 games also. So it isn't that anybody, you know, you're not necessarily seeing a whole bunch of teams that played a lot of 4-quarter games, because all the really good teams were 45ing teams and beating them by halftime. So, you know, they're kind of on a level playing field, not really being accustomed to playing into the 3rd or 4th quarter because the other team didn't do it either. And that's your 6-man football story for the
day. Okay, guys, I think we're running out of time here. Justin and I've got to get up bright and early tomorrow and tackle this freeze at work. So we're gonna have to wrap up and get some sleep here for a little bit. But Quentin, thanks for coming on, man. Especially such short notice. We kind of talked about this as the day was going on to put something together, just because we weren't able to do this live because again, work. But anything else before we go, Quentin? Anything you want to leave us with?
Thanks for having me on, guys. I know this is, I think you have a segment of high school media that hate realignment and a segment of high school football that love realignment. I'm more on the love side. I think it's good. But when I was growing up in El Paso, the districts almost never changed. It was the same schools you were going to play all the time, every single year. And the fact that there's this level of change and there's divisions in football and you can see teams moving so often and you see fresh opponents, I think it's good for high school football. So I really like realignment. I always love to see what kind of non-district matchups teams concoct, in the situation. Sometimes it's out of necessity, and just greedily as a member of the media, I just like going to see the high school football coaches from around the area all converge in one spot. We can talk. There's the pressure of the season's off. We can just, just shoot the bull basically and have a good time. So, especially with all these guys that we're not going to see again for 5 or 6 months until 2-a-days start. So it's a way to keep the high school football season going. And I really love this time of year. So I appreciate you guys having me on. This is fun to talk about.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm trying to find that coach's name. I'm gonna have to post it later. Once I find it, I want to say it was Chad Ritchie, but I don't think so. I'm gonna look it up and I'll post it on our social media later. But again, guys, thanks for coming. Quentin, thanks for coming on. Justin, I'll see you in the morning. And
hey, give Quentin a shameless plug on Twitter, dude. He puts out good info and
if you're not following Quentin Martinez, Quentin, give everybody your Twitter handle real quick before we go.
Just at Q Martinez on Twitter. Give me a follow. Right now it's the spring. There's a lot of sports going on, but I always tweet out about kids getting offers, anything like that. High school football is a 24/7 kind of thing, 365. So there's always high school football content on my Twitter feed, in addition to any other high school stuff that's going on here around the Coastal Bend. So give me a follow at Q Martinez, and I'll keep you up to date, hopefully.
Yeah, and if you during the football season, if you're following a game and you want up to the minute stats, Quentin keeps a running stat count in his head.
Yeah,
and he'll put stats out at the end of every quarter, which is very helpful. But guys, again, thanks for watching. I know it's late and we came on a little late, so we apologize for that. But man, work happens, man. It's cold, and relief sometimes gets terrible.
Or you order a pizza from the wrong joint.
Or you order a pizza from the wrong joint. Yeah. All right, guys. Again, thanks for watching. And I don't know when we'll be back, so just follow the social media and you'll see us. Quentin, thanks again, and we'll see you later.
See you guys soon.
Peace.